The Universal Peace Federation of Austria, the United Nations Correspondents Association, in cooperation with the Permanent Mission of the State of Eritrea to the United Nations in Vienna and Horn of Africa Peace Initiative, hosted a panel discussion titled Horn of Africa Women's Forum in Vienna, Austria, with a special focus on women's empowerment and development. The event was attended by diplomats, investors, members of the VIC, United Nations, and guests invited from Eritrea, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, Egypt, and Austria. Dr. Peter Hayder, president of UPF, in his opening statement welcomed the guests and gave a brief introduction. The panellists included Ms.Yohanna Teklu and Ms. Mahta Tewolde of Eritrea, Ms. Etenesh Hadis from Ethiopia, and Ms. Hadiel Osman of Sudan. The forum was chaired and moderated by Magistrate Elisabeth Cook, Vice President of the Universal Peace Federation.
I'm glad to call the first speaker, Mrs. Mahta Tewolde, who comes from London. She has been working in the Eritrean Youth Association in the UK for a long time, and she is also a researcher on women's rights and situation of women generally. She will talk about the role of women during the armed struggles in Eritrea. Let's welcome her with a warm applause.
I'll be talking about what happened then as a gateway into my colleague Johanna talking about what happened after independence and talking about what the situation of women's empowerment is right now. But before we do that, I'd like to take you back 1970s. It was mainly limited to supporting roles. They were preparing food, being involved with, some were creating revolutionary music, or carrying messages and information from different locations and so on. As the movement began to gain momentum, more and more women felt compelled to join. So as the situation worsened, under the brutal occupation of the Derg, which was the military regime at that time, they took control in 1974. More young people began to join in larger numbers. There were sort of like waves and waves of them leaving. And among these were actually large groups of young women who'd heard that women were starting to join these movements, and they thought, well, okay, this is something that applies to us as well. Some of these women were, high school graduates. Some had entered university education. They were knowledgeable. They were aware. They had a drive to do something and felt that this was something that applied to them equally.
Ms. Mahta Tewolde from the panel spoke about Eritrean women's role during the struggle for independence. She said Eritrean women played a tremendous role in bringing independence and peace to Eritrea by fighting along their male counterparts.
There was a rapid transformation in their role and position throughout this time. So in a short space of time, they're out of the home, in the workforce, and fighting alongside men. Although it was a unique experience, it also had a lasting impact on the empowerment of women throughout the country. And even though there still remained traditional attitudes throughout that period, there was a vast transformation in how the role of women was seen, and it paved the way for the roles expanded into the post-independence period, which Johanna will talk about. By 1991, when independence was achieved, Eritrean women had shown that they weren't fighting for the sake of fighting, not because they wanted to fight. They were fighting for peace and justice. And one of the most popular girls' names around 1991, time of independence, is actually Selam, which means peace. And that's not coincidental, because this is what people wanted then and what people want now. Thank you.
I'm very looking forward to pick up where my colleague Mahta left off and to explain what has been going on in terms of Eritrea's women's empowerment and development post-independence.
Ms.Yohanna Teklu addressed Eritrean women's development post-independence. She spoke about the National Union of Eritrean Women and its achievements, a grassroots civil organisation that was established in 1979. Today, with a membership of more than 600,000 and offices all over the country, it is actively involved at all levels of society and government to advance the empowerment of women and to protect their rights.
The government has managed to create jobs for these women, but also educate them in the harmful effects of FGM. The prevalence of FGM has decreased from 95% to now is 18% for under 15s, and it's 7% for under 5-year-olds. That is something that we are constantly working towards until we reach 0%. It is outlawed in Eritrea, so it is something that is punishable by the penal code. And the way it's been amended is through religious leaders and elders again, where they would ask for identity cards before a marriage is conducted to ensure that both parties are of the legal age. We have suffered from deforestation due to the long years of colonization and war. And so many women, especially female-headed households, have been partaking in soil and water conservation by building dams, by forestation programs, and they immediately benefit through this by receiving salaries for taking on these projects, and also by securing interest-free loans to start their own sustainable farms. The Saviour stove was created, and it has a much reduced take of wood, so it's very efficient, and it's also very environmental friendly. And so it has received a lot of awards globally, and it has also improved women's lives in the villages. As Mahta said, 30% of the Eritrean combatants during the war were women. And so after independence, 30% of electoral seats were reserved for women. But that is not where it has stopped for Eritrean women. They have proven to be resilient, trustworthy, hardworking, and women that could achieve great things, even in leadership. And so at the moment, this is where we are in terms of women in government. It is a good start for the first 27 years of independence, but we will not be satisfied until we reach the absolute 50%, and that we do have stake in all leadership positions.
Yohanna Teklu, thank you so much. It was an incredible message which you gave, a message of hope, and I hope that this can spread in Europe, because the average person doesn't know about these rapid positive developments in Eritrea. Thank you once again. And one more applause for her. Our third speaker is Mrs. Etenesh Hadis from Ethiopia. She is the chair of African Women's Organization based in Vienna. And she will speak about the initiatives of the Prime Ministers of Eritrea and Ethiopia. So let's welcome her.
The Horn of Africa has a peace perspective. That is, I can say also, we suffered in this area too much. But Mr. Abiy Ahmed, when he comes to the Prime Minister post, he brought various results. First result is the peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea. President Isaias, we admire and we thank him. This was appreciated and accepted not only by the Ethiopian people, by the Horn of Africa people.
Ms. Etenesh Hadis from Ethiopia, chair of African Women's Organization, on her part spoke about the peace agreement signed between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Commending President Isaias Afwerki and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed for courageously leading their citizens towards peace and prosperity, she underlined that the normalization of relations and the adoption of the joint declaration of peace and friendship between Eritrea and Ethiopia will provide the people of the Horn of Africa with the opportunity to focus on shared aspirations for closer political, economic and social ties.
They didn't put mediators. This is unique. Unique. I admire both government. They succeed themselves to talk and to resolve their differences and their problems. So this is to say congratulations for both governments. If we allow mediators, the mediators, they come with their self-interest. Yeah? After either self-interest, either their government's interest. This happened not short time ago. We have seen it for so many years during Emperor Haile Selassie, during the Derg. This is the most important thing, to come together by themselves. So thank you very much. If you have any question, I'm ready to answer.
My name is Hadiel Osman, and I'm actually born in Vienna and I live my whole life here, but my origin is Sudan. So today I have the honor to talk to you about the women's empowerment and development in Sudan. So Sudanese women have benefited from a law giving them equal pay for equal work since 1973 and have enjoyed mandatory representation of at least 30% in parliament since 2005. Many now work as ministers and advisors to the president, as high court judges, academics, doctors, engineers, and ambassadors. But these successes did not happen overnight or effortlessly. Today I will introduce you leading Sudanese female pioneers who helped to pave the way. So women have played a great role in the history of Sudan, old and recent. Women have ruled the old age of the Nubian kingdoms before Christianity and Islam.
Ms. Hadiel Osman expressed that Sudan had one of the earliest and most vigorous women's movements in the Arab and African worlds. From the 1950s to the 1970s, the women's movement in Sudan was successful in securing and extending basic legal rights to women. Women's participation in the 60s and the Intifada was important to the success of democratic changes. However, their roles and abilities were never recognized or promoted by the authorities. Ms. Hadiel Osman said that the previous generation have done their part, and now we want to do our best to support the new generation of the 21st century.
I want to talk about Ihsan Fakhri. The modern Sudanese women's movement is considered to be Ihsan Fakhri, the first Sudanese woman to hold the position of judge and the first Supreme Court judge in the Arab world. She was persistent and committed to reflect a positive image so that the people accept the idea of women judge, and has challenged all the difficulties and instance to become the first judge in the history of the judiciary in the Arab world in 1965, and was the only judge in Sudan for 7 years, but she have paved the way for many judges after. So thank you for listening, and in my opinion, we're still not where we want to be. We're still not having the 50% wherever area.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hadiel Osman, and thank you, each one of you. I was so enthusiastic about your presentations, and I hope that we can really spread them through Facebook, websites, or whatever, because we need to know these developments. We need to know what takes place in these countries, in the Horn of Africa, and it makes me personally so happy to hear these presentations. Thank you once again, and a big applause once more.
The participants of the forum said that they found it to be enlightening and was one that gave an insight into the overall challenges on women's issues related to the Horn of Africa. In her closing remarks, Magistrate Elisabeth Cook stressed the importance of the forum in bringing together stakeholders from all fields to address and share their experiences, as well as reflect the reality in the Horn of Africa and explore opportunities for further collaboration towards sustainable development and empowering women in the Horn.
I personally was so happy to hear this rapid development, and I think there's so much hope there, and really the people and the government, they are doing their best to build up their countries, and I think this information has to go out to the general public, to the people. So from UPF we will try to spread it through our possibilities.
I find that it's really important to have a strong neighbor, and we cannot have our closest neighbor as a biggest enemy. We always have to keep peace, at least within each other and within our borders.
It was nice to hear a lot of people not speaking only about the bad things, but also speaking about nice, positive, progressive things.
I think it's the first civilization and mankind came from the East Africa. It's such a belated form, and then importance of the woman in that area is really remarkable.
When people ask me where I'm from and I tell them guess, they guess Eritrea, they guess Ethiopia, they guess Somalia. So we are all one part, and it's important to have peace in these places because we are more similar than we think. We have more in common than we think. So peace in these countries, like in Horn of Africa especially, is the key for development, is the key for equal rights for women, is the key for almost everything.
We've also learned of pioneering exemplary women, for instance, from Sudan, which really incorporates the forward thinking of African women, especially in the Horn. So overall, it was fantastic, and it was mind-opening in a sense.
I'm really proud of the peace agreement between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Also, the Prime Minister went to Egypt to make sure that peace happens, so we don't get into conflict regarding the Nile, which was also a very important thing to do from the Ethiopian side as well as the Egyptian side, which I'm also proud of, because we have to keep our relations strong together. Together we will make something better.
I was very much fascinated with the panelists who presented the topics. And the reason why it's important is, of course, peace, and peace is in our mind, and that's the way we react. We think about others, our attitude towards others, and that's how it makes sense for me.
And it was beautiful to listen to these young women today, because also we learn a lot. I'm learning a lot because we don't know so many details, and in some ways it's amazing how they move forward as women. And sometimes I tell them it's not so different from Austria that you might think at some point.